Just want to thank you all for joining me today for the podcast. We have some great questions lined up for you all to learn a little bit more about your history in injury and violence prevention, what brought you here, and just to kick us off to have a little fun, I have a question I want to pose to the group, and whoever wants to go first, just jump right in. So thinking about the trajectory of your career, where you are currently, what sort of song or genre of music comes to mind that best describes either your role currently or your career in injury and violence prevention thus far? Anybody want to take that on first? Katie?
I will jump. Oh, go ahead, Katie.
Sorry, Lorna.
That's okay.
Sure. Yeah. So one of the thing that came to my mind was just the song Wrecking Ball. Because oftentimes, I'm the tester of the waters in a lot of groups that I'm in. But a CEO of the children's hospital that I worked at a little bit earlier in my career said that I was the youngest bulldog he ever knew. And I always took that as a compliment because, our work is not always welcome, but, we tend to have professionals in our field who are pushers, who push through.
I like that. And you come through, right? Come through really, really hard. Lorna, how about you? What were you thinking?
Yeah, the first thing that came to mind on that question would be a genre. And to me, that's easy. It would be the blues, because every person on my list, every case on my list, those folks are deceased. So I like the blues, but that's kind of where I came to mind on that one.
Okay, I'm with the blues as well. Wrecking Ball. Okay, we're generating a playlist here. How about you, Lisa? What are you thinking?
Yeah, Mighty, I was going to say something else comes to my mind. I actually started my career in traffic safety. So I was going to say Life is a Highway. It's like the movie Cars, and it's like life's like the road that you travel on. Sometimes you bend, sometimes you stand, sometimes you turn your back to the wind. If I had a better singing voice, I would have sung that for you.
I sung it in my head, so I
hope everybody's singing it in their head. But it's one of those things, I think, in injury and violence prevention. Isn't that so true? Sometimes you bend, sometimes you stand, and sometimes you have to just turn your back to the wind and do your thing, regardless of what the topic is or who you're trying to impact. So that's the song that resonates with me.
I love it. Sam, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I love all these answers. I've been thinking of that, the song by the Proclaimers, I'm Gonna Be, and so I would walk 500 miles. And I think there's a theme there that resonates with me about I work in the advocacy space, and that you're planting all these seeds and you're elevating these conversations, and they're the start of a longer journey. So that's kind of where my head was at. And I also just like the song. I think it might be about love or something, as many songs are, but feels relatable.
Love it.
Well, you just led right into mine when you said the word journey, because mine would be Don't Stop Believing.
I love it.
There's just so much of a sometimes uphill battle, and you're working on getting people to believe in prevention sometimes, and working in intervention and prevention and along the full spectrum. And you just have to keep going. You have to just keep going, keep believing, and don't stop believing. So, and I'm singing that in my mind when I go.
That's a good one, because you do. I'll speak for myself. Sometimes throughout my work, there are some days where you're just you have to push a little harder than others. To Lorna's point, it's sort of blue, and Katie, you really want to come through like a wrecking ball, but sometimes it's maybe not as forceful as you want it, but recognizing that it is a journey, and the good, the bad, and the in between will all be a part of that. And sort of speaking of journey, it's sort of a great tee for the next question I have for you all. I would love to hear a bit about your professional journey, sort of like your elevator speech. How did you get to where you are currently, and did you see yourself here initially? Lorna, how about you?
Did I see myself here a few years ago? No. It kind of was by happenstance. I've been with the OSBI for about 7 years, doing the violent death reporting system for about 5 years. I've got over 20 years of experience with criminal justice and with court administration. So kind of fell into this, but it's just very interesting. It's fascinating. It can be sad, but always something new.
Keeps you on your toes, huh?
Right, it does. It sure does.
I was waiting. Okay, there you go, Lisa.
I'll pop in here and just
I'm
say,
like,
I've been doing injury and violence prevention work for more than 25 years, and it really just started from my passion to do community work and be out kind of boots on the ground type of work. And started when I was a freshman in college. Actually, I took a class in community health education, and our professor was like, we need to do a survey of bike use and bike helmet, usage on campus. And if you can imagine, on a college campus, nobody was wearing a bike helmet at all. And I don't know, it just really started from there, and it really kind of sparked a passion in me to want to continue to do injury prevention. And so from there, I went to a state health department and did child passenger safety. And from there, I went to work at a children's hospital and did some advocacy and outreach. And then I ended up in the position I'm currently in at an injury control research center, getting to see how the research impacts the practice. So I kind of took a little bit of a long road, kind of like my song, Life's a Highway. It's been twists and turns and things like that, but a real nice opportunity to see the kind of continuum of injury and violence prevention from, practice to research to policy to back and forth. So it's been a great journey.
Yeah.
awesome. I always tell people I sort of got started. I was at the cafeteria. This is before I knew better. I had like waffles with ice cream. College student, you think that's totally nutritious, right? And that's how I learned about public health and injury prevention. It had never dawned on me, and prior to that, even though when I looked back and sort of assessed some of the work I was doing before that, it certainly was in alignment with public health principles and injury and violence prevention, but I didn't have a name for it at that time. So I like to think that it sort of was percolating all along, and then I had an opportunity for it to come to fruition. What do you, Katie, how about you?
Yeah, so I actually survived a fatality crash as an infant. And so I knew very early that I really wanted to work in traffic safety. But I have a communications degree, so that's a little bit of a sideways motion, but it's worked really well for me. I took the opportunity to work with Save Kids early in my career, which provided a lot of advocacy training and, communications type of training. At the same time, was at a children's hospital, so very evidence-based work happening there. And then I went to work on policy in my state with our highway safety office, and working with the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration on like federal grant management and things like that, all still working on those evidence-based strategies that we knew were working in Oklahoma. We were the first state to pass a rear-facing to two car seat law, so that was a really exciting time in my career, working on that. But then I am working at the National Safety Council, really working more with adults, but still working on the roadway and preventing crashes, really helping translate that research that Lisa and all of the great researchers are doing, translating that to practice in the workplace. And how do we educate adults and then have them take that information home to their families?
And I can share too. I think I heard a lot of people mention advocacy, and I think that I knew that would be a component of my job. But a little bit later to the injury and violence prevention work, that is a real focal point of what we do at the YMCA. So I'm on our government relations team, and I started my career as an 8th grade teacher down in Houston. I'm in DC now, but I worked as a teacher for a few years. I love kids, working with young people. It's can be a chaotic, but it's an exciting environment to be a part of. So I love that. And I moved to DC and had a variety of odd jobs, but I ultimately started working on Capitol Hill, first in the House of Representatives, then in the Senate. And a big component was constituent interaction, but also taking a lot of meeting with different advocates. It's a really great way to learn about a lot of different topics. and kind of, you get to kind of be the conduit between the constituent and the member of Congress you work for. I worked for 3. And I love the Y. I always liked, I was a Y camper. I like the services that the YMCAs provide throughout the country. And I thought I had a pretty good understanding of the portfolio, more or less, that I'd be coming into working when I transitioned to work for the Y. Childcare subsidy, childcare regulations is sort of my background. But we do a lot. And it's interesting how the themes around the federal investment in injury and violence prevention are so relevant to our mission of community strengthening. So those are really funding streams, initiatives to the CDC and other entities that are really impactful to the work that we're doing on the ground. So I really spend a lot of my time in this portfolio looking at the Injury Center at CDC, but then again, other sort of initiatives at the Department of Justice, HHS more broadly, looking at that violence prevention lens. So I'm definitely less community. I don't have a background in public health in training or anything like that, but it's been a really great learning experience for me. Just how relevant those topics are to, like, when you think about the community you want to live in, a lot of the stuff that we work on here as a collective is really the backbone of that.
Awesome. Interesting.
So my path into public health and injury violence prevention has been pretty winding. By trade, I'm an attorney, and after some stints with judicial federal clerkships and commercial civil litigation, I found a home within human rights law, and I worked with an organization called the Advocates for Human Rights, located in Minnesota, but we did a lot of international and national and local work. My focus was on gender-based violence, sexual violence, and human trafficking. I did, like I said, a lot of international focus, but my focus on Minnesota was in developing our human trafficking response with many, many partners. And so it was sort of at that stage that I was connected with the Minnesota Department of Health, because they were a prime partner in this effort and in that work. And really enjoyed the lens of prevention, coming in before the harm has occurred, which as an attorney is so often my approach and my response. So at some point I made the switch into MDH to supervise these programs that I'd been very much involved in as from this human rights, social justice perspective, and then being able to jump into public health and more specifically injury violence prevention. So I went back and I got my MPH and have just really enjoyed this and found a new home within public health, and really enjoyed this connection of policy work, of prevention work, of programming and intervention. It's just been a great fit. And so I don't begrudge my time as an attorney. I think it has sort of melded really well for me to be able to think about things, and especially my advocacy and policy work in the past. And so, but it's been, it's where I'm supposed to be now. I definitely, with working on these issues within the health department, sort of serving the statewide, and still I consider it, human rights, social justice work to be public health work. So I feel like I'm still connected to my roots in that sense.
Mm-hmm. So for me, what's sort of resonating is that we have 5 different folks here who have had very different sort of career trajectories. There's still so much synergy there. And I think the wonderful thing about that, it really shows you sort of the ripe opportunities that exist within injury and violence, public health, certainly, and injury and violence prevention more specifically, so that as we start thinking about how do we promote and get folks to be more interested in injury and violence prevention, I think it's really cool for them to hear these different stories and hear that there's sort of no like injury and violence prevention training per se, right? I can probably count on one hand how many courses I actually took, but I sort of borrowed and took from other jobs, other courses, just other ways of learning about and becoming injury and violence prevention professional. So I just think the conversation here really just taps into this idea that there's not a singular course to get into, and by course I mean sort of pathway to get into this work, and that's the beauty of it.
I'm
I think
so
that's the
jealous, Beatrice.
efficacy. Oh,
Oh,
sorry.
yeah.
I was just going to say, I think that that's what makes it work too, because public health is so multidimensional, and the issues that we address in injury violence prevention are so and they're so layered that we have to address them with this multidimensional lens. And so if we can take, you know, people from different walks of life, from different, you know, educational backgrounds and practical backgrounds, that's what makes our approach even stronger.
Absolutely. Lived experience, like Katie mentioned, you know.
Absolutely. I'm jealous. Beatrice, like always say, I wish I would have been an attorney, and we need more attorneys in this field because we're constantly, you know, relying on policy, or, you know, building policy to lead the way. So it's a great place to be.
Yeah. And I would say I had to gain an appreciation for policy, right? Some of you, the folks here from GR and advocacy, maybe you can understand this, but I just, at one point, policy felt so nebulous to me, even though it shouldn't. It should be pretty straightforward. But so I think like the more I learned about it, I was like, what is going on here? You know, you think that the solutions are so straightforward, but you realize how, for lack of a better word, convoluted that process can be, but also how important it is, because I can't think of a major public health achievement that you can name that didn't have a policy component or implication to it. So I say that to say, even coming into this work, I sort of had one frame of mind, and the more I got into it, I got a broader appreciation for all of the pieces that needed to be a part of the puzzle. And so I know the answer to my, no, Lorna, please.
Oh, no, I don't know how I did that. Thank you.
Okay. I guess you're going to say something. I was going to say that I'm sure the next response to my question, the response to my next question is everything, but I would love for you to tell the listeners sort of like what's one interesting thing about your job, or one fact that folks would be surprised to learn about in the work that you're doing. And I know it's everything, so it's hard to answer, right?
Yeah.
I'll talk about what I've been most recently working on, and everyone wants to talk about it, which is cannabis.
Oh, yes.
The NSC just
I was about to do a motion, but I stopped.
National Safety Council just finished a survey of over 1,000 employers, and a third of workers report observing cannabis use on the job. And so I think that—
You said a third?
Yeah. So I think that, you know, our frame of reference for cannabis and cannabis use is changing. And, you know, as states legalize and kind of figure out the regulatory framework that's necessary, we have lots of challenges in front of us. But I think, you know, the way forward is elevating public health as our priority here.
Absolutely.
I have a lot of kind of like fun YMCA facts. Like, we're 175 years old. Basketball was invented at a YMCA.
No way, I didn't know that.
I think Father's Day, it's hard to say. It's first celebrated at a YMCA. So there's a lot of really kind of cool YMCA facts, and a lot of complicated ones too. It's such an old history, so a lot of it mirrors the kind of complicated history of the United States. But then I think, you know, maybe it's interesting to folks listening that is this whole advocacy ecosystem that a lot of nonprofits, a lot of different entities, you know, they have all these experts, but then there's this middleman who helps bring that message to elected officials more seamlessly. So that exists in nonprofits, for-profit entities, obviously, but it's an interesting, pretty dynamic middle ground to be a part of.
Interesting facts indeed. Others, anything interesting or what folks would be surprised to learn about your organization?
I think, you know, for MDH, Minnesota Department of Health, our human trafficking approach has always been sort of unique in the sense that many states have a safe harbor law that sort of protects youth from criminal prosecution for being prostituted or being bought and sold for sex. But ours is sort of a twofold process, which one, it sort of protects them from prosecution, but it also directs them to services. And those are the services that we grant out funds for and oversee programming and interventions and support and regional coordination. But at the time, and maybe even now, we were the only state that had the sort of the centralized office with of our Safe Harbor program and our human trafficking response out of a health department. But we partner with our Department of Public Safety and Human Services so that it is this multi-agency approach, but still the backbone would be a public, recognizing this form of injury and violence as a public health issue, even though it's traditionally been seen as a criminal justice issue with the connection to pimping and prostitution, et cetera. So, but really recognizing forms of exploitation as a form of injury and violence, and applying in partnership with other approaches, a public health approach, which is has been sort of fun and unique and difficult to be unique sometimes because you're sort of creating things that on your own, but at the same time it gives you you know, some leeway. You're trying things and you're working on, you know, moving things forward in partnership. So that's been sort of fun.
I have a follow-up question for you on that. So thinking about sort of the balance of the public health, criminal justice, where would you say, sort of in your purview culturally, what shifts are happening in sort of how we think about sex trafficking and sexual violence in general? Or do you see any positive shifts in how we sort of understand the etiology of it?
Yeah, I think so. Hence my, you know, believing in change. I think that there has been a shift in our culture. We've seen things that have been normalized for a very long time now be called out or be called in and be acknowledged as like, wait a second, this isn't normal, this isn't healthy, this doesn't have to be this way. It's no longer just accepted that certain groups will be harmed or left for exploitation. It still happens, but I think that there's an acknowledgement shift and recognizing that what we accepted as to be just normalized, oh, we'll always have prostitution. The oldest, you know, profession is also the oldest oppression. Now is that shifting of acknowledgement. That it doesn't have to be normalized, and that it is harmful, that it might not always be a choice, that it doesn't always have force fraud in the way that we think something is, the images show, that it can be much more nuanced, and that that individuals that are in the life might need some additional supports as well, and how, and that there is a role for different agencies to play, that criminal justice has a role to play, and
absolutely,
but it doesn't have to be the only role. There can be some augmenting of a response as a state, and public health definitely has that collaborative nature at its root. And so, yes, to answer your question, there's been a shift. We still need more, you know, we create culture, we can change culture. We create a culture of exploitation sometimes, and we can change that. And I think I've seen some of that be shifting in an awareness and an acknowledgement and a desire to try different things. So yeah, I'm positive, you know, more to go, but
sure. Just when you brought that up, I was curious. So thanks for that.
Thanks.
And Lorna, you, and what's sort of interesting?
Yes.
And
I would say, I think my job is incredibly interesting. The violent death reporting system is basically a victimology study. We look at the how, who, where, when, what, and why on one death. We look at it from 3 different angles. We take the medical examiner report, we take the law enforcement report, and then we also use the death certificate. And we pull so many different circumstances from all of those documents to look at how to use this as a tool towards prevention, or what are the trends and why is this happening. Each case to me is just a snapshot into the victim's worst day. It's the day of their death and how that happened and how it came about. No 2 cases are the same, whether it's a homicide or a suicide. We also look at some undetermined deaths. We look at unintentional firearm deaths, and then we also look at legal intervention, which is when law enforcement in the line of duty kills someone and the circumstances on that. So it's fascinating in an alarming way, I guess I would say. So,
yeah, for sure. I always say, I think in another life I was a forensic pathologist, and you know, and I think about things like that, and the National Violent Death Reporting System, as I'm sure you're aware, is having their first ever national conference in 2023, which I'm sure is going to be super fascinating. We're going to hear a lot of great work that folks are doing when they're analyzing the data. And I know I've read some reports, and so hats off to the abstractors and folks like you who are in that data day in and day out, because it's certainly not an easy lift, but it's very necessary for the work that we're all trying to do.
Yes.
So as you think about your own sort of journey in injury and violence prevention, what's some advice you would give to either a student or early career professionals who are considering injury and violence or some relation to this work and as a part of their career trajectory?
Well, Mighty, I'll jump in here
Okay.
and just say, working obviously at an injury control research center based in a college of public health, we certainly have an opportunity to do training with the workforce that's coming in and the students that we get to work with. And I always talk to them about how important it is to build their networks, but build a network that's based on like genuine connection, right? I feel like I couldn't do the work that I do if I hadn't sought out the people who might have kind of these compatible collaborative spirits.
Sure.
You know, I think it's incredibly important to the work that we all do. But not only do you value that, you have to value them, right? Like, so you build these connections, but if you don't value them and take the time to kind of, what I want to say,
like
foster
them, yeah.
foster them and help them along, you just don't know who's going to be able to be part of that network. And so I guess that's one of my biggest things when I'm talking to a student or somebody like early career that's maybe joining a professional organization like Safe States or Savor or APHA or those types of things. Like, seek out the people that you think you have a connection with and then continue to foster it, because they'll likely provide you assistance in the future and vice versa. You're able to provide them assistance. So just kind of one of those give and take types of things. That's one of my biggest pieces of advice, I guess.
Yeah, I love that. That's great. It makes me think about, so sometimes I work with CEF and they do the site visits to accredit schools of public health. And that's oftentimes we're reviewing sort of the academic advisor and seeing how they pair them up. And to your point, students say, hey, I'm interested in this. And then they try to find someone who has some shared research interests or whatever, because I do think that creates an opportunity for there to be a firmer foundation if there's already something that's connecting the folks, and maybe that's going to create a likelihood for them to actually foster and facilitate that relationship as opposed to it just being some randos, So I think that's a great point. Others?
I think from the perspective I have now, I would just encourage folks to look broadly at if you're interested in injury and violence prevention and just in general, like making communities better. I don't think you necessarily think of, let's say, like the YMCA, but when you get a little deeper, obviously we want safe roads to schools, and we want to prevent drowning, injury in the swimming pools that we operate around the country. We do violence interruption programs at a local level. So really thinking broadly, because I know it's certainly, or maybe even looking locally at like what those look like in application, who's coming together in your community to make your community be the place where everyone wants to be. And just that would have been and is really helpful to me to keep that kind of broad lens. Doesn't have to be as technical or medical, I don't know the right word for like scientific as you think, but there's an applied portion to it too.
Yeah, I like that. And it to me also takes a more asset-based approach, right? When you think about the work that we're all doing, it's not just about the absence of injury and violence, but it's also about the presence of opportunities and other things so folks really can reach self-actualization. And Sam, I think that's what you're talking about. I think about myself when I did case management and I was doing like after school programs and financial literacy, all these things that I had no idea, sort of like we're protective, you know, and help folks to just facilitate their lives in a way. So again, it took a while for me to make the connection, but once I made the connection, I was like, oh, that's what we're talking about here. And I think that's very much what you're alluding to. It's not just thinking about sort of those adverse events, but really thinking about the upstream factors, the buffers, and the other things we can do to prevent untimely deaths and the like.
Yeah, and I always, go ahead. I was just gonna say, I always find the word upstream a little confusing, but totally what you're saying, like those foundation, and that's what we work in upstream, right? Like having a quality childcare program is going to change the outcomes. And it is, yeah, like you said, it's really exciting. Helpful what you think about it.
I think being open to that squiggly path, you know, knowing that your path is going to be squiggly. All of us here have kind of demonstrated that we come from different backgrounds and we have very different jobs. But being open to that squiggly path, you know, I worked as a lifeguard at the YMCA in college, you know, and so, which has nothing to do with my job now. But no doubt, you know, I learned great skills there. And, you know, my early work in pediatric injury prevention, you know, and now in working in adult injury prevention, it's just that path is unpredictable, and embrace it, because the road straight up is probably not going to happen.
Yeah, and it's boring probably, right?
Yeah, we could all probably tell great stories on here about
about
the jobs that we've had.
Yeah, I have some great ones about a nursing home I worked. How about some others? What would your advice be?
I like the squiggly path scenario that Katie mentioned. I think that is so true, because I think no matter what small job maybe you start at going up, everything applies to your life experiences. And I think being open to all kinds of things, I think that the injury prevention field is very broad. And you know, there's just so many nooks and crannies of it that you can get into. So I just think it's a great field.
Yeah, I like the squiggly line, keeping an open mind. And I just like to think about like when you're in school and kids are like, I want to be a doctor, a lawyer, I want to be a teacher. Wouldn't it be cool if they're like, I want to be a child passenger safety seat technician or an epidemiologist or whatever?
Yes.
It'd be cool to get those injury professions more integrated into our lexicon, you know. But that's my dream in my home.
Just wait until your kids come home and tell you that they have told their teacher that my mom works in weed, because cannabis it's crazy.
Like, wait, does your mom sell weed?
Please don't tell people that. Not that it's not a worthy profession.
Right. I'm not always the most exciting person at the dinner parties. Well, what do you do? Well, sexual violence prevention, you know. That sort of gets heavy sometimes, but that's okay. You deal with that.
Yeah,
I think
interesting.
You know, for students, you know, or people just starting off, it's you know, I think about 3 words. I think about showing up. I think about being engaged when you do show up. And I think about being proactive. You know, we don't know all of the possibilities. We learn those options in our life and those opportunities by showing up, by being engaged, and then by reaching out. And I think that's what, you know, echoes a lot of what people have already said. We, you know, can find out so many more opportunities. I wouldn't have known, my path was not direct, and I wouldn't have known some of these opportunities if I hadn't just had some random conversations because I showed up to events that I'm like, maybe it's relevant and it's interesting and it feels connected. And then I'd also say, you know, for me personally, I had to find a passion. I had to stay connected. That's how I continue to do the work. That's how I continue to believe that we can create change, because it fits what I'm passionate about. Not everybody needs that in their life, and you can choose that for what you want or what you don't want. But it definitely, I think it helps within injury and violence prevention work to continue to believe that change can be made and you can continue to move forward. But you don't have to find that right away. You can sort of create a path that will lead you there, and don't be afraid to change your path or completely jump if that's what you think your passion is calling you towards too.
Awesome. Very sage advice across the board. Or are you going to say something, Lisa? Or no? Oh, okay. So now that you've sort of imparted your knowledge onto potential students and early career professionals, is that something you wish you would have known sort of going into your own fields? And if not, what's something that you wish you would have known or thought about before you got into this work broadly, or your current role, if anything?
Mighty, I wish I would have known how prevalent suicide is. We are currently working on the 2021 data set, which is normal. We kind of work in arrears because you've got to wait up for that data to come in. I'll give you a rough idea of about 1,400 deaths in the state of Oklahoma. About 70% of those are suicide. And that is much higher than I expected. Would have, you would think homicide, because that's what you see on the news, and that's what you hear about. But and it's not just Oklahoma, and that's pretty normal on the averages. Overall, the cases are going up, but I think I had no idea how many suicides we have every year, and the young ages as well is very sad to see.
Yeah.
So, it's like, what can we do to find out what is causing this? What can we do to help? What are some programs? What are some tools that are needed to help maybe alleviate some of that? So.
Sure. And Lorna, I want to ask you sort of the same question I asked Beatriz. Do you see there being a shift in sort of us, whether it's Oklahoma or otherwise, from your purview or perspective, where we're grappling with that a little bit more? So when you hear those stats, that's pretty startling. And I just wonder, do people, from your perspective, are they getting it? Are they recognizing how devastating of a toll that is putting on us all collectively as a society?
Yeah. I think the numbers speak for themselves, but the real question is, what can we do to alleviate that? What can we do to make the numbers go down? You do see a lot of Suicide Prevention Week and promotions and, getting facts out into the media. So I hope that we're going in the right direction and trying to identify some things that play into that.
Sure. Other advice or what you thought you would have known prior to getting into the work you're currently doing? Beatriz, that's okay. Yes.
Yeah. So for me, I felt very comfortable in the policy and programming world, but I had to sort of build my skills quite a bit within being able to speak to epidemiology, to surveillance, to be able to speak to those worlds of, for me, it was always the issue itself, the quantitative was there, but there was the qualitative stories that spoke to me. And so building the skill set to be able to use both in tandem, to use both to their strengths. And that still isn't me, but I recognize where my gaps. I've tried to fill it with my, studies and MPH, but I, relying on those epidemiologists and those that speak that language and have that skill, so that together we can really address the issues by using the two languages, the two sides of this, multifaceted coin. I guess it's not just the two sides, but really that was something that I think, I stepped into and quickly realized I got to hone my skills here, at least my understanding, so that I knew what questions to ask of my colleagues who have those skill sets. And we've been able to build that. We've been able to build a lot more surveillance on these issues. But that was something where I had to get up to speed and find my allies, find the people that could fill in too. And so understanding what your gaps, what you don't know, and then being able to make those connections to fill it in, to do the work too.
And that's the beauty of public health, right? Those partnerships, and why we speak so much about not working in silos, it's particularly with even in your organization, because I think of it sort of like the SWOT analysis, right? Seeing where the weaknesses are, but the opportunities, and how do we sort of do the cross-pollination to counter some of those issues, or to bolster what we see as opportunities and strengths. So I think that is sort of indicative of what more of us should be doing in the spaces that we occupy. Lisa?
That's such great advice.
I was just going to say, not being afraid to step outside your comfort zone, right? And like, if you don't know, do you know what I mean? Seeking the resources and asking the questions and things like that. So I started in practice. Now I kind of work in research, but dabble in practice. And so I think it's just recognizing and making sure we know the value of all of the contributors, to this issue, whether it's an epidemiologist, whether it's, somebody who's doing community health education. And like you said, Mighty, not working in our silos, but being willing to bust through those silos and just, stepping out.
I love that, stepping out, acknowledging when you don't know something. One thing people laugh about me, but I say it all the time. If you know nothing else about me, I'm going to ask questions. I'm inquisitive. I'm going to inquire. I will never feign or act as if I know something when I don't, because when I speak about something, I want to know that I know what I'm speaking about, so I think of the same thing in these spaces. And I get, to your point, Beatrice, get an allyship with folks who do know more than me in certain areas, because it's an opportunity to learn. And there may be some opportunities for me to share and impart knowledge in that direction as well. So I love the idea of just owning it and then stepping out there. Katie, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I think that it surprised me early in my career how many barriers there were to accepting public health as a priority. I had to learn to listen to others because that's not my immediate nature. And so I had to learn, where we fit and take the opportunity when it came to talk about public health and to talk about the importance of, the public health in economics and public health and being able to translate that to so many different things, because the audiences are so diverse and they aren't public health professionals like us. Safety and health is not their top priority a lot of times. And so helping them understand and listening to what their needs and priorities are, and then figuring out how to weave public health into that was something that I was shocked to find out in my early career, that not everyone wanted, everyone to be safe and healthy and happy all the time. So it's a challenge, but I think it's what makes our field interesting.
Absolutely.
I was going to add to, something I've learned, and this might be kind of during the pandemic a little more, so I do a lot of storytelling, just the power of bringing in that authentic voice and that lived experience. So one silver lining of the pandemic perhaps is it's been so much easier. We have a meeting with maybe like a senator from wherever to have local folks zoom in, and just like the power of that authentic lived experience in our field is so different. And that can be from somebody impacted by violence or injury, or a practitioner working to alleviate that. I'm thinking from kind of a YMCA lens, but just how valuable that is. And it just, someone doing the work on the ground at a local Y or otherwise can speak, tenfold to the impact that I can convey, even if I've, taken ridiculous notes and worked on being compelling. So, just kind of grounding ourselves in this is probably for me, talking about grounding ourselves in the sort of the lived experience and just the power that contains.
Totally can appreciate that. There's a lot of power there. There's some community work that I do here in DC in one of the wards, and I just think about the access that we've been able to get because we've had folks with lived experience who serve as gatekeepers in a sense, and just working with them, I don't think the work would have been possible without engaging the folks with the lived experience, because they were able to tap into things that we just wouldn't think of, on the surface as we're sort of trying to reach out to the broader community. It was a gun violence, sexual violence project. And I kid you not, it's when I first learned the term citizen scientists. And I thought that was pretty cool, because they may not have that formal training, but they know all the intricacies of that community, and without them, the work would not have been possible. So certainly appreciate that. We're coming to an end here. Great chatting with you all today. Again, thank you for lending your time for the podcast today. I just want to know sort of where you see yourself. I know it's sort of maybe a hard question to answer, but as you think about your profession and your work continuing to grow at your current organization, or just how you want to impact the field of injury and violence prevention more broadly, where do you see yourself going when you grow up? But in all seriousness,
well, I'll say I'm like 15 years into my professional career. I like, where do I see myself going? I like the work that I do now, and that it makes me, happy, and I feel like it's mission driven. So I think I'll continue to do something that is, has community impact.
Sure.
And also ultimately works around young people. To improve the lives of young people, and help them grow and learn and develop into great citizens who in turn,
yes,
continue the cycle. So that's kind of vague, but
no, I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. The joy, particularly when you think about young folks and the energy and the vigor there, I'm totally on board with it. I learned like texting lingo, so I stay cool. Shorthand, I have a mentee, and I kid you not, pardon the tangent here, but when he texted me, I had to like decode it, like, dude, what are you talking about? But hey, if I'm like you, Sam, and I work more with the young people, I'll stay a little more in vogue, and I'll be able to tell what some of that shorthand text stands for. Others, Beatriz?
Yeah, I think the irony of prevention work is that you're pretty much trying to work your way out of a job. You want to, have your position be no longer necessary. So that's probably the ultimate goal professionally, but short of that, I, true to the sort of my path, I'm just continuing to leave myself open. I enjoy working at with the state, with my colleagues. I enjoy having that, attempted to support and change the lives of the people in Minnesota and work with them in that process. So, like I said, this is sort of a passion area for me. So I see myself always being involved in some way or another to, ensure that, we are meeting the needs of our communities, and holding ourselves accountable for those social justice, human rights goals and that exist in public health too. So in some way, always being connected to that. But I've got a lot more work to do left here at MDH. So I'm excited for that.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'll just say that I love what I do. And so it's one of those things that I'm very happy where I'm at now. But I think that, like Beatriz said, I would keep myself open, but I think, I have a front row seat right now to seeing how research, can inform the practice and even policy measures and things like that. And that's really exciting to me because it kind of is that whole continuum. But, ultimately, and this is going to sound very cliche, right? But, it's to continue to promote injury and violence prevention as a public health priority. I think that's what we're all trying to do. And, ultimately, hopefully we can create, safer, more equitable communities, a safer world. That's like pie in the sky dreams, but it's one of those things that, yeah, this is a passion area for me. And I hope that we can continue to work together, because I think just even this conversation has opened my eyes to all of the different facets. I mean, I know that there's multiple facets of injury and violence prevention, but it's really things like this open you in a different way and help you see the possibility.
Absolutely. I think to your point too, Lisa, it's like sometimes we may not call it injury prevention or violence prevention, but we know it's totally in alignment with those tenets, those principles, and those practices. So I'm with you on that. Let's keep pushing it forward. Katie, what are you thinking?
Yeah, so just what Lisa said, elevate, for me, it's traffic safety and elevating traffic safety as a priority and recognizing car crashes as the public health crisis that they are. Before a couple of years ago, car crashes were the leading cause of death, for many, many age groups. And so really getting, in the National Safety Council, we really hope to promote traffic safety as a priority in the boardroom, where CEOs are talking about it and prioritizing funding for it, for safety and injury prevention in their companies, but also when we're taking it home to talk to our families. And I think one of the keys to that is really embracing and educating ourselves about technology. I think we have a lot to learn as technology is evolving in the vehicle space, in the infrastructure space, and working together to kind of elevate all of those priorities to save lives.
Absolutely. And Lorna?
Yeah, I think every one of us wants to just feel like we make a difference. I still love what I do. I enjoy my job. I will be here who knows how much longer. I guess in general, I would just like to know that I would leave the program even better than I found it. I just want to strive to have the most accurate and complete information we can so that we can hand over a toolbox with some meaningful components to it. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, I would say on behalf of my fellow injury and violence prevention folks, public health, our communities that you all serve and do great work for, thank you for the work that you're doing. I find it inspirational, aspirational, and I think we'll be fortunate if you all are in mentoring roles and bringing folks up behind you, because we certainly need people like you all in those roles to help facilitate and foster the next generation of leaders. Although we still have a lot of work to do, but kudos to you all for the great work that you all have done thus far. And so that concludes it, unless there's something that somebody else wants to say as a closing remark before we head out of here. No? Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.